You're listening to the ProcureTech podcast, your weekly show for all that's cooking in the digital procurement space. Yes, we've got the hottest startups, thought leadership, and conversation from visionary industry experts, and definitely no stiff corporate content. I'm your host, James Meads, procurement pro, digital nomad, and ProcureTech fanboy. And now, here's this week's show. Yes, welcome to another edition of the ProcureTech podcast, where every week we bring you everything that is fun and innovative in the digital procurement space. This week, we're going to be digging into the world of direct materials and manufacturing, which is, as we will soon find out from my guest on this week's show, an area that's been a little bit neglected by procurement tech over the years, with the exception of things like e-sourcing platforms, which are definitely very much focused on buying raw materials and direct materials. The rest of the whole ProcureTech ecosystem, certainly I get the feeling, has been very, very much focused on the indirect space. My guest today aims to change that and has brought into the world a very, very nice looking, if I have to say that, platform that helps you manage all manner of direct materials and sales and operations planning. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest to today's episode, Anne-Sophie Le Bloas from Ravacan. Anne-Sophie, welcome to the show.
Hi, James. Thank you very much for having me.
And I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Yeah, Le Bloas, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, I did 5 years of French at school, and I can get by without starving, and but that's about my limit. It's Spanish was much easier for me.
It's actually from Brittany, western part of France, with its own language, so to speak. Yeah.
That's pretty much Cornwall with slightly better weather.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah.
So When we spoke before setting up this interview, you actually come from quite a similar background to me in terms of where you started your procurement career. So maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into procurement, and then your journey into being a startup founder and how that came about.
Yeah. So I think I fell in love with procurement and sourcing very early, actually. When I was in high school, preparing to go into business school, and I saw a documentary about buyers going to China and trying to find cool toys to purchase for preparing Christmas. And I was thinking, wow, you can actually travel the world and find very cool tech and things and be paid for this. And so when I went to business school, I wanted to learn, in industrial management and sourcing. And afterwards, I did a specialized master's degree called the MIE in Bordeaux, quite famous in France and Europe. And yeah, I was like immersed into sourcing very early. And I started in CPG, working for Reckitt, buying plastic bottles. And then I moved to aeronautics, working for Rolls-Royce in Germany. So different type of context, more technical products, because I was buying composite parts and titanium fan cases for the jet engines. And different type of market as well, because you go from a very competitive global market to oligopolistic supplier markets. And then I moved to automotive and worked for Visteon, which is a former subsidiary of Ford. And at the time, they wanted to sell their interiors division. So the challenge was to find as many cost reductions as possible, right? So I started being a cost reduction manager for 4 countries. And that was a very fun time, because beyond, resourcing and relocating, we did a lot of VAV activities, and yeah, that was fantastic. And then I moved to the US, worked for Fitbit, the wearable device company. And there I was global commodity manager, looking for innovative materials for this startup.
And I'd imagine working for Fitbit is very, very different from the three other previous employers that you'd had. And my background, I started my career in the automotive industry too, and then moved into CPG or FMCG as we call it in Europe after doing that. So yeah, certainly similar experiences of some of the industries that we've worked in. So tell me, what are the challenges specifically of working in a manufacturing environment in what could be described as sort of old school or more traditional industries? Because for someone maybe in a bank or financial institution or a tech company or perhaps pharma, sort of a highly profitable industry, this is a different world, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because actually it's highly collaborative, right? In the world of manufacturing, there are two types of decisions. There is engineering or a technical decision, and then there is a commercial decision. And so the challenge a little bit for manufacturers is to allow the organization not to have those two decisions in sequence, but more in parallel. So as a buyer, you need to be in close relationships with the engineers and as well the quality department to make sure that actually your decision on what supplier to select is agreed upon by everybody and documented as well.
And did you see noticeably different levels of digitization in those different industries, in the more traditional manufacturing versus working for a technology company?
Actually, surprisingly not, and I think this is why
Wow, okay.
as well I created Ravacan, because I was like building tools in Excel from the beginning to organize my portfolio, to understand trends, and to prepare the negotiations. And I really thought that by moving to Silicon Valley, I would finally have the joy to use a powerful software, because salespeople, they have a lot of data analytic software and CRM to prepare the negotiations, but until now I had only my own models, and yeah, with Fitbit it was the same, like a lot of Excel spreadsheet that I had to build for my own team, and this is what triggered really the fact that I wanted to bring on a better solution.
And I guess now, having gone over to the other side and having your startup that essentially sells software to manufacturing companies, with wearing your hat as a startup founder now, do you find that there is a lot of resistance to change, and it can be quite difficult to get conversations with decision makers in those big traditional manufacturing companies?
I think our challenge as a startup is to find the innovators, right? The companies that really want to invest in new technologies. But I have to say that COVID is playing in our favor, because for a long time, sourcing teams have been using Excel and email to do their work, but now with COVID, they have to react faster, and this is where they start to see that they can't cope actually with the new pace with Excel. Like, to give you a clear example, with some shortages, if you look at off-the-shelf products, you might have, a need for a specific semiconductor or a part that is standard. And so you reach out to a supplier and they give you their price and their lead time. And because usually it's right now it's much more expensive than before, the buyer has to come back to their models, understanding, okay, this new price, how does it impact my product margins, right? So because you have your bill of materials, so if this component is increasing in price, how does it impact the price of the cost of the full product? Does it impact other products? And in terms of cash flow, if I need to buy a higher MOQ or buy inventory, how does it impact my situation or working capital? And figuring all of this in Excel will take a long time. And we heard, prospect and customers telling us that by the time they get as well the go from the management and go back to their supplier saying, yes, okay, we agree with this price. Then the supplier says, well, the inventory is already gone. I sold it to another company. So,
Yeah.
being super fast in taking decisions and understanding your market very well is crucial. And you need to step up your game with better software.
And I guess part of this as well is that pre-COVID, this is a type of procurement where, in services procurement, you're often not necessarily close to your stakeholders, but in a manufacturing environment, it is actually quite normal, isn't it, for the buyer and the engineer and most of your stakeholders to be in the same production plant or to be in the same regional headquarters. That is something that certainly my experience from working in manufacturing businesses was more common, because there was that expectation that you would be on site and you would visit them quite often. So I mean, if they're now having to move to a remote working environment where the procurement teams and perhaps the central engineering teams are not sat in the plant, and that's just going to increase massively the volume of email, isn't it? If you're saying that, predominantly this was all done on Excel, I suppose, yeah, you could use SharePoint, but it's not a particularly good tool to navigate and track. So, yeah, I mean, when you bring all of this under one system, I mean, first of all, let's take a step back. I mean, what's wrong with managing direct materials within an ERP system? I mean, plenty of businesses do. I mean, what's the risk there?
Well, there are different things, and I want to pinpoint that actually, now the information is changing very fast. Imagine, for example, the factory of one of your tier 2, tier 3 has to shut down because there was a COVID case. And so for a certain period of time, you won't have capacity, you won't have production. So understanding as well how it's going to impact your supply chain is very crucial. And because information that you might get is changing every day, you can't really rely on asynchronous ways of working. By the time you get this spreadsheet and you open it and you analyze it, then the data might have already changed. So there is a very big need for better collaboration, and current tools are difficult to reach those goals. So this is one thing. The other thing is, when you're we specialized in consumer electronics and consumer goods, and in that industry, a lot of brands are relying on contract manufacturers to assemble their products. So they would design all the components, find sources, negotiate with suppliers directly, but they are not placing POs to them. They are going to ask Foxconn, Pegatron to actually place the POs on their behalf. So it's directed purchasing, right? Direct purchasing. And so if you look at what's in your ERP, you would only see the spend with your first tier. So this is why managing actually the sourcing with your ERP is not 100% suited for this model. Also, you have your bill of materials in your PLM software, for example, and you want to track what is the breakdown of all the costs. And we see that very big companies are limited in that sense, because as well, you might have just one price for one component, but it's not always the case. Actually, you might, with off-the-shelf parts, agree on a price list with different MOQ steps, and this price list is agreed. And from time to time, you want to capitalize on the fact that you have higher demand to switch to a higher MOQ, and that actually in current ERPs, you need a manual operation to update the price directly, because it's not going to switch to the best MOQ automatically. And this is something we do actually, the MOQ recommendation.
That's really interesting. So you are actually leveraging then AI to be able to smartly pick which one is the best option at that given point in time, based on inventory and based on supply chain lead time, that type of thing.
Exactly. So you have a lot of parameters as well to capitalize on more savings or to limit price increases by, You have MOQ, but you have as well allocation, supplier allocation. When you have multi-sourcing, and if a supplier is actually increasing their prices, maybe you want to actually decrease the share you're giving to them, right? And so all those parameters are not very easy to update automatically in our ERP. And so actually, Ravacan as a platform is connecting, brands, suppliers, contract manufacturers to collaborate on all those variables together.
And not only that, but if you look at the cost of shipping now, it could be quite an easy decision just based on shipping cost. If you've maybe got a supplier in Asia, and then you've got another supplier in Europe or North America, depending on where your end production is, the cost of shipping now could be a factor that makes you want to switch from one to the other. Likewise, currency is another big factor. I recently spent a few weeks in Turkey, escaping the winter, and what they're experiencing right now with the currency crisis. It's for their exports, it's great, but that could be the difference of it being a competitive source one week and not being the next with such a volatile currency situation. So any tool that's able to do that automatically without having to manually calculate it, I think is certainly a huge added value proposition potentially for a business that has complex supply chains with multiple sources. So just a quick interlude, because there are a couple of things that I really want to make you aware of, because I think they will be valuable for you. So number one, we now have a monthly newsletter where we bring you curated content of everything that's happening in the digital procurement space. If you want to get that, just head to procuretechpodcast.com/newsletter, enter your name and email, and we'll get that delivered straight to your inbox. Number two, if you're a head of procurement or a center of excellence leader, and you're perhaps a little bit confused or overwhelmed with what's out there as best of breed digital procurement technology, especially if you're a mid-sized business, schedule a call with me. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes in this episode. Just hit that schedule a call link, and we can have a quick chat to understand your challenges and what potential solutions out there may be suitable for your organization. And now let's get right back to this week's show. So that's one aspect of it then, in terms of being able to do smart demand planning, shall we say. It does a lot more than that, though, doesn't it? Because there are other modules within Ravacan that software companies have developed best of breed solutions as individual sort of companies, as individual best of breed ProcureTech solutions. For example, you've got should cost projections, and you've got a demand planning tool in there. You've got spend analytics as well. Maybe just walk me through what you feel as being the main advantages of bringing all this under one platform, rather than going best of breed with each of these 3 or 4 different tools.
Yeah, so I think what's very valuable is to be able to, automate some repetitive tasks and get price updates from your suppliers very quickly, and as well to gain visibility of what's going on in your portfolio. It should be, but it's not easy for buyers to be able to specifically answer to the management saying, yes, actually, the overall prices are going up, and this is the breakdown by commodity, by supplier. These are the reasons, for cost increases. And this is what we do automatically in the platform. So as a buyer, you create your commodity strategy based on analytics that might take a long time to create with traditional Excel spreadsheets. But in our platform, it's done automatically. And so spend visibility is one thing. And as well, right now with the current disruptions, making sure that you have capacity available at your suppliers to build your product. So securing supply is one of the top priorities for 2022, according to procurement departments. So this is something we are tackle as well with a module around tooling management, vendor tooling management.
And vendor tooling management is something I remember very, very well from my days working in tier one automotive suppliers, because we often had no clue where our tooling was kept and who was the owner of it. And one of the first things I remember having to do going into one procurement role was to put a tooling asset register in place, because we had no clue where any of our tools are. So to be able to digitize that and have that electronically rather than just saved in a file on somebody's C drive or on SharePoint, I can certainly see the value of that. And I guess it can be, the supplier can automatically update it as well, couldn't they, in theory, if a tool is moved from one location to another?
Exactly. You understand the pain, right? I was blown away when I started my career to see that it was not properly managed. And tooling is very expensive. Injection molds cost 30 to 100K dollars, and you're always, if you're not managing your tooling properly, you're always facing surprises like, a tool is breaking, or a tool has to be refurbished, and it creates some a CapEx spend that is not forecasted. And it's critical to not only to manage cost, but obviously cost and spend, but also managing capacity and availability of product, to be able to have in one place all the tooling. Where are they? Have they been moved actually to a lower cost country without us knowing it? So this is something that is very important as well, making sure that tools are destroyed after the life of the lifetime of the tool, because you have some IP problems here that can appear, right? Because you would find maybe proprietary design that is going to be used by a supplier if the tool is not destroyed in time.
Right. You mean you mean them using it for generic aftermarket supply? That's maybe that they might be using your tool and selling the parts to third-party manufacturers who are essentially undercutting you if you're the OEM.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And as well, you need to make sure that your suppliers are, storing your tools and that they are properly labeled. I remember that in my past, life, where I was a buyer, we had a supplier going bankrupt, and my colleague had to rush to the supplier because the creditors were actually planning on selling the molds for just the raw materials, and there was no property tag with our company name on it. So we had to put stickers on every mold to make sure that they are not taken away. Having a tool like Ravacan allows buyers to keep track of where the molds are, where have they been manufactured, so you can actually keep track of the efficiency of the molds, the level of scraps, what is the overall cost, how much did you pay, in what a financing plan, and as well what have been the refurbishments and all the quality documents you want to track.
I think the other good thing about tooling asset registers as well is, especially now, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but with, VUCA and supply chain instability, more and more companies are looking at going down a dual sourcing strategy now, aren't they? And if they, especially, you could almost bring sustainability into it too. And if companies are looking at bringing production closer to home to reduce the amount of shipping or transportation, and they've got two sets of tools, then now it makes it even more important to keep tracks on those assets, because you're right, you mentioned injection molding, but stamped products and any sort of metalworking tools are also extremely expensive too. So
That's right.
Knowing where they are and the quality of them, and the Internet of Things, I guess, also comes into this as well, isn't it? If you can put some sort of chip or tag onto the tool, and it tells you when they're being moved or where they're being located to. That brings in a huge amount of additional transparency within your supply chain that you otherwise just wouldn't have had.
Yes, exactly. And a buyer is very hands-on, and it's very like I feel it's changing the way you work when you have a platform and you get alerts on demand over capacity ratio, and you see, okay, here there's an alert for this a part, for example, where the demands are higher than the capacity. So the buyer can say, okay, well, what are my solutions? Do I have to ask the supplier to work extra time on weekends? Because you can see the number of shifts and the number of work days per week. And so you can see, okay, do I have inactive tools? Can I actually ask the supplier to work overtime and things like that? So, having the data that allows you to take the good decisions is very, for me, it's very fun. This is why I wanted to be a buyer in the first place.
So, what size of a company would you typically need to be to see some sort of ROI on this in terms of investing in something like Ravacan as a tool to be able to digitize this sort of more holistic view of planning and manufacturing operations for direct materials?
Well, actually, we are serving mid-size and enterprise clients. So it's more, say, a type of configuration. Our sweet spot are companies that are using contract manufacturers to build their product, and they need to have, a collaboration tool where they can hand on information in a very effective way to all those parties together. So this is why we are actually working with mid-sized companies and enterprises. So this is the type of clients we are working with.
That's really interesting. So you don't have to be a big sort of tier one OEM manufacturer in any one of these industries to take advantage of it. Then you could also get the benefits as a mid-market business.
Yeah, that's right. And the ones that are, because you were talking about ROI, the most compelling thing is that when you are a company that is growing dramatically, and actually our tool is very well suited for teams that have a lack of resources and they need to achieve more. And so, for example, one of our clients, early clients, Molecule, they were actually completely booming with COVID and the wildfire in the US. They sell high-tech air purifiers. So their business went from having a few products to being a global market. And they had only 3 buyers at the time, but they managed to actually expand their portfolio and their activity. They multiply by 4 the number of products they were managing, and as well the portfolios of the buyers. The buyers were able to take on twice as many parts as they had before, and they multiply the number of product lines by 13. Actually,
that's a great example. And I always say it, and it's something I'm very passionate about, that you don't have to be a massive company to benefit from ProcureTech. And that's not just implementing a P2P solution. That is literally everything else that is out there in the procurement tech landscape as well. So thank you for that example. Final question, Anne-Sophie, if anyone would like to learn more about you or about Ravacan, where's the best place that people can get in touch with you?
Well, they can go on our website, ravacan.com, RAVACAN.com, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. I'm very present on LinkedIn, so very happy to connect there as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me. And I'm really pleased to showcase a manufacturing procurement tech solution after talking about all the different solutions that serve predominantly, the indirect space and the efficiency space. It's nice to focus on raw materials because that is the backbone of a lot of companies. So great to hear what you're up to. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, James.
That was Anne-Sophie from Ravacan with some insights there around how manufacturing businesses can get the most from digitizing some of their upstream operations when it comes to sourcing, ordering, market intelligence, should costing, and all that type of stuff that affects a traditional manufacturing business. Just a couple of things before we sign off. If you like what we're doing, then don't forget to go to your favorite podcast player and hit the subscribe button so as you get notifications each time that we launch a new episode, which is, of course, every Wednesday. Thank you very much for listening. We know there are a lot of other procurement podcasts out there. A lot of them actually are pretty good. So thank you for inserting us into your earballs today. And until next week, take care and see you then.